Have a lot on your mind?
Is it obvious?
Have you ever fought the Dark Hunters?
Hopefully we won't have to. Apparently, this is just a routine call.
Nothing about a Taraga summoning 11 Toa sounds routine to me. I'm Nidiki, Toa of Air.
Likan, Toa of Fire. You know, thinking about fighting an army of Dark Hunters almost makes me wish for an enemy as manageable as a rookie fish.
That's where you're wrong, my friend. Me? I'd rather face 100 Dark Hunters than a hungry rookie any day. They persist. They persist for one reason, Likan. They know how and when to make their move.
You heard the Shadowed One. You know what's supposed to be down there. If I go down alone, I'll end up a light snack.
You know, I almost feel sorry for those hunters. It'll be an honor to fight beside you, Toa Naidiki.
And I beside you, Toa Likan. Or may I call you brother?
Alright, hello everyone, welcome back to a brand new Toa Talk. This is Toa Talk number 12. I'm your host, Ben, and today we have another brand new guest on here. Max Nui, you may introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, I'm Max Nui. I'm the executive producer and director of the Mangai project. That's where most of you guys might know me.
Oh, of course. What's your profession / hobby? Well, I guess you just told us, but...
I do, well, you know, like actual profession, I do some insurance software, quality assurance stuff. Very boring. Some very boring stuff. So, the escape is, you know, I like to work on, you know, writing scripts and directing 2D animated projects.
Nice, nice. When / how did you get into Bionicle?
My earliest memory of Bionicle is actually back in 2001. I would have been like 3 at that point, so like very young, probably too young to be given a Bionicle. Let's be honest.
Yeah.
My parents got me Anua and Gali, and I very distinctly remember, you know, turning their gears and showing my parents and being like, "This is the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life." And you know, it was just uphill from there, I guess.
That's awesome. You're not that much older than I am. Like, you have like a family and all that. That's cool. Anyway, sorry. What's your favorite set from Bionicle?
I would have to say, and this is gonna be an answer that it's kind of it's got a or I'd like to think it's an interesting explanation behind it, but the Ultimate Duma set, which yeah, it's a set that a lot of people, you know, it's a combiner. It has a lot of weird jankiness to it, but at least in my opinion, it is the truest form of Makuta that we have. And I guess what I mean by that is, you know, every other time we see Pterodax represented in the story, he is, like with Takanuva, he's putting on a show, right? He's putting on a show to look like he's defeated, and so he kind of shows up to the party with this, like, extravagant gear, you know, like, looking like a roided out, you know, dude.
Mm-hmm.
And then everywhere else in the story, he's either disguised as Duma, disguised as... yeah, well, he's, you know, Antidermis, or Maxilos, you know, everything like that. In the context of the 2004, and I know we'll get into that, but it's like this is his moment that all his motivation is just to destroy the Toa. He's not interested in necessarily. I mean, there are some opinions out there on, like, you know, how much of it he had planned. But at least within the context of, you know, the story as it was written in 2004, he's very much just like, I want to kill these guys and take over the Matoran universe. And whenever he puts these pieces together, it feels like it's his most raw hostile form, and it is monstrous.
Mm-hmm. So, because like every Makuta has like a, you know, like their base form. I mean, obviously like, everyone has like their base form, but like even like you would look at like Mizrax, like he had like the mutated form that we actually saw. We never have really seen like his original form. With like Pterodax's original form, I've seen like I haven't really seen a lot of people like really talk about this idea of him having like an original form. Like, so would you say that like with the logic that you're applying to the Ultimate Duma set and like kind of like with how he's putting it in, like in the movie, would you say that like the 2003 set was like his original form, or would you say like that's just something we haven't seen?
I would say it's probably something we haven't seen. You know, I bet there's elements of that, you know, Ultimate Duma, and maybe there are elements of how he presents himself to Takanuva, but you know, I imagine that, or kind of how I like to interpret the Makuta and their appearances. It's kind of based on utility in a way. It's like I'm going to look like this for this, you know, job that I'm doing. I'm going to look like this for this job. In terms of an original form, I feel like some of the Mockus interpretations online of just like the Makuta build that kind of looks somewhat similar to the 2003 set, except, you know, he's taller, has, you know, like maybe a cape or something. That probably feels, at least in my head, the most like his true form.
Fair enough. Yeah, I have a mock that I did of him in like in his original form. I have him as a much more like slender build. Like he doesn't have the gunmetal immediately. Like the gunmetal for me, I'll probably explain to you like off recording. But the gunmetal comes later. But I have him with like black and silver armor. He still has like obviously the black Krakan and all that. But yeah, like it's unique seeing like different people's interpretations of stuff, which is kind of like the theme throughout this podcast, talking about your project and things like that. No, it's cool. I like having canon like theory kind of discussions, and a lot of people don't really get into that with Bionicle, I find, for some reason, but we gotta do a Bionicle theory channel or something. That'll be cool. What's your favorite canon character? Sets aside, who's your favorite character?
I would have to say Jala.
Great
I know it's a little bit of a like a bread and butter type choice, but
yeah.
I just like how solid he is in the canon. You know, he's just a reliable dude who's just trying to do the best that he can with the situations that he has.
Mm-hmm. It's funny. This just popped in my head for some reason. But I saw this like meme slash theory that like after Mask of Light, you know, like when Jala like dies, that when he gets brought back, he's like not technically the real Jala, so people call him Skinwalker Jala.
Is that like maybe the real Jala, you know, like his real consciousness got sent back to the Red Star or something?
Yeah, like basically from the mask, like because Jala starts within the context of the story, he starts taking more like initiative with things, because like before he was always like, oh, I'm the guard, you know, I'm the captain of the guard. And then later when they went to Metro Nui and he formed like what would be like the Anika team and all that. So some people say that like when, you know, the combiner of Makuta and Pterodax, Takuta Nuva, or whatever the hell it's called, that like when he brought Jala back to life through the mask, that like it brought back like what the mask kind of went through, if that makes sense. Well, I don't know. I there's someone that can explain it better, but like I found
I see what you're cooking.
Yeah, you see what I'm cooking. It's not my theory. I gotta be clear. It's not my theory. But I read that and I was like, that sort of kind of makes sense, but it's also just kind of like, I don't know. It's scratching the surface on like the 2 Hydraxons thing now, where now we have 2 Hydraxons because of the Red Star. So I'm like, okay, well maybe we don't need that. But yeah, anyway. So today on this podcast, the opening topic is going to be the 2004 retrospective. Last week, IDS and I talked about 2005. We ended up spending the whole podcast talking about 2005, but hopefully it won't be like that again. We'll be much more focused in this time, because with the other one we were just bouncing between so many years. It was like I like 2005, but it would just kind of shift to like, oh, but 2006 was so much cooler, or like, oh, but this year was like, you know.
See, I assumed that it was because 50% of the conversation was strictly about Rudaka. See,
Oh.
that was my assumption.
Yeah, we spent like a good minute and a half talking about her, but yeah, basically what our conclusion was from 2005 was that like the Titans, like the characters and the builds somewhat, you can kind of debate on the builds. Some people don't like the Titan builds, but like the Titan characters themselves make that year of 2005, and I think most people can kind of get behind that. But yeah. So what's your opinion on the sets from 2004?
The 2004 sets, and I'll preface this with I actually somewhat. Oh, it was like it was 3 years ago, I think. 3 years ago completed, or no, actually I just got the last set 6 months ago from one of the guys on the server. Shout out to my boy Aiden. He got me the Toa Matanui set, but I actually have a complete Bionicle set boxed up, downstairs, like all of the G1 Bionicle sets that were released. So having handled the 2004 sets, that's the thing that impresses me most about them, is just that even compared to, Lego's quality is always very exemplary, except with the lime joints and that's with those exceptions, it's always very high quality. But the 2004 sets, I have just continued to be super impressed with the durability and just overall thickness, and just these parts feel very solid. They feel like things that they invite taking them apart and rebuilding them into new things, mocking them in a way that even some other years of Bionicle don't invite that.
Yeah.
So I don't know what your thoughts are on that aspect of them.
I definitely do agree with their durability, like for sure. Like I'm looking at like the ones I have on my shelves right now with Vakama and I don't know why I'm blanking on the name. Wenua. And like a lot of like, I don't know, like I look at like other sets that go through like the bins and all that. Like if I get like a lot, like maybe some parts get like chewed up like a good amount. Like the 2008 ones almost always get scratched up super easily, but like the 2004 ones, even though like they went for like the softer plastic option for that year versus how things were in 2001, 2002, when it was like the more rigid plastic, which I honestly might prefer in terms of like a Kanohi, but overall, like they are really great. Like I think they're kind of underrated these days. I think people kind of give them too much flack for things that obviously got upgraded as time went on, like with obviously just with Lacan in general, just with his color scheme, taking out the gray and adding more red and throwing gold and black in there. And you saw the Haga, like they really made the gearbox work a lot more while having the posability and the play features, and obviously the metallic armor is like really nice as well. I will say like the Metru build for like Toa, it's my favorite silhouette for a Toa, like hands down. Like,
yeah,
they just look like, I don't know, they just look cool. Like they just look like heroes to me. Like I don't know, like they look noble, almost like, I don't know, just the shoulder armor alone is just really really cool. I really like
it. So the nature of the Metru build, it's very modular in terms of like every time I see a new like Toa build, in current year, 50% of the time, it's not an Anika build or a Mata build or even like a G2 style, the CCBS. It's almost always a Metru build, and I think that's really interesting that we are continuing, to innovate with these components.
Yeah, no, definitely. And like even with like because like with what I do with like a lot of like sets and like sometimes like canon like characters, is that like I'll do like I don't even want to call it like a revamp. I'll just like adjust them or whatever. So like with the Toa Metru, for instance, like I'll swap out the grays like for their Chiraga color accents. So on like Vakama, I put like orange. And I mean, Wenua has gray, so gray suits him. He looks good in the gray. But like, yeah, and like I would obviously like you would have to paint official parts or 3D print and paint them, but like I really like to utilize the Glatorian ankle guards for the Metru builds. I know some people don't really like doing that, but like I'm just really attached to the film designs. I think the film designs are pretty solid overall. We'll get to that later, but like I do like the Toa Metru. Like they're very, very underrated Toa. Their tools are quite cool as well. Vakama's disc launcher, almost find that it's too big, kind of like because if you have it on his back, it restricts his function. And of all the Toa on that team, him having the gear function probably doesn't make the most sense. He probably would have been better off having like the Haga type function with his arm, like with the Technic connector. So you can have
The
like,
other
one
weird
stiff arm, but yeah, you go ahead.
Yeah, the other weird thing about that joint or just that weapon too is that it doesn't have, like you could look at it as a pro or a con, right? But it doesn't have the traditional, axle connector on it. So it's just kind of a weird. It's just kind of a weird tool in its weird corner. The other thing that I was very confused, and like I kind of see it as a missed opportunity in general for the Toa Metru, is like they included the trans red disc with Vakama that shows like his mask and I forget it if it I forget if it had Matoran text or what that Matoran was, but it would have been a really cool opportunity to see those with the other Toa.
For the longest
kind of a shame
time, I thought they had that. Like when I was a kid, like looking at like the magazines and all that, because I think there were some official Lego graphics, in like the magazine or some type of promotional art that had the other Toa having like their own like discs, not like ones that would come with the set, but I don't know, for some reason that's just ingrained into my brain that like they had them. And then for the longest time I only thought like I only had Vakama's because he has, when you're selling him on the secondhand market, you kind of have to include the disc with him, or if you don't, then, he has a gun with no bullets. So but yeah, no, huge missed opportunity there. I definitely agree. I do like that they continue the theme of like each Toa having like their own unique eye stock, because that kind of went away in 2006 and onward, like especially with the Fantoka, when they did bring back the Metru. Well, I mean, not Fantoka, Mari and the Fantoka like brought back the Metru heads. Which is
they all had the same. Didn't they all have the same green eye color? And I guess the Makuta had red.
Yeah, the Fantoka. Yeah, they all had green, and then the Makuta, they all had like orange, red kind of thing going on. I really wish that we saw more of the Paraka eye stock. Like that was just a cool piece.
Yeah.
Yeah. Unfortunate, but yeah. So I like that they continued that as well. What's your opinion on the Toa Metru's like mask, like how they coordinate with the Turaga ones? Because IDS was like they all semi-coordinate except for Anawa's has like almost no relation to the official Komao or like the original Komao.
As much as I like the Toa Metru masks, like as much as I like the designs and stuff, I feel like, if you're trying to make them match with the Noble Kanoe, they are very over-designed, which is, like it's a hot take, but because it would have been difficult to undesign them in some way, like make them smoother or whatever. I think that takes away from the vibe that Metru Nui had, but it is just like a good example of the weirdness of them being so over designed and trying to bridge that gap. Is I think a really good example of this is No the Robot is he has like a YouTube channel or Instagram. So what I believe, or no, it wasn't him, it was the person on Instagram who's been making those beautiful renders of various scenes from the Bionicle story. I have their book. I don't know why I'm blanking on the name right now, but
I think it's Iconic Stills.
Yeah,
I have the original book too. I have the Metru one on pre-order, but
I should have remembered that name. But anyway, they just rendered a version of like all of the Metru Matoran before they became Toa, like holding the Toa stones and stuff. And yeah, they chose to create like a Matoran version of the Great Masks, and it's just kind of it's a jarring thing seeing those designs and seeing the noble ones, and that's not the fault of Iconic Stills. That's more just the fault of the Lego designers. That you kind of have to bridge this gap between like, oh, here are the Matoran masks, the Toa masks. It's not as clear cut, how these masks are associated with each other.
Yeah, definitely. And those masks that he uses, like they're created by Galva. I use them myself and with my own Toa Matoran variants. Like I like those ones, even though like they're fan designs, so like they're purposefully coordinated, right? But like obviously they take influence from the film, but it's a really good blend between like the 01 and 04 version. I think like it utilizes some good elements while having a film kind of look that could look like it's from the set, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, like those ones are really, really good. And I've seen some people make their own like Toa Metro like revamps using those Matoran versions of those masks, and like they work and all that. But I definitely agree. I think if you take away the detail from those Kanohi, then it's definitely gonna like it won't necessarily go with the Toa Metro builds themselves. Because you look like their armor and like even like their arms, like they have a lot of like vent pieces and just a lot of like angular kind of things that you saw elements of on like the Mata and the Nuva, but like to a more, I would say, a little bit more of a simpler degree. Not that it's a bad thing or anything like that. Like it's just there's just a lot more detail put into that goes to like the whole vibe of Metro Nui being this crazy big metropolis of a futuristic kind of city that's exclusively inhabits like Bionicle Matoran. But yeah, no, like definitely. I
think you're also fighting against the design language too of the media from that year usually depicts the Matoran, like the other Matoran outside of the Toa Metro, usually depicts them having noble masks, in various different shapes and all of that stuff. So whenever you just with that design language in mind, trying to put like these over designed masks next to the masks that the designers carried over from the Matanui saga, it's so like you're fighting that design language too.
Yeah, no, 100%. What's your opinion on the Metro Torn design?
Don't turn them around.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I don't mind them. They look nice on the shelf. I like their mobility and I am a Mari Nui Matoran supremacy type guy whenever it comes to the design.
That's fair. You'd like my tier list video of the Matoran design, so I definitely think the Mari Torin is a super underrated Matoran design. Like it's just like if you look at it from just like a toy perspective, like it's definitely the best of any Matoran build. You have the gun on the shoulder, and they have like knives, which are cool, and like the posability is great. You can actually move the head properly, and you can turn them around. They don't look totally like naked, so there's that too. But I do really like just the chest piece that they made for the Metro Torn. I feel like it's just such a perfect like body, like frontal like body, like the torso. Like it's just really good on that front. If only like they like because I did a revamp of it, and I threw in some Technic in there, and I threw in the Metro chest covers on like the back to kind of cover it up. And
oh, okay.
I'll send you my Matoran build. You might have seen it in like the server that we're in, but so that's kind of how I kind of get around that, because I do agree that's like it kind of like if you're using them in like 3D or even like just stop motion animation, then it just like they just didn't think that one through a whole lot. Like it's literally like the CCBS meme. It's just like that. Yeah, it's like I don't know. Again, to throw another analogy, it's like the Homer Simpson thing when he like pulls his skin back. It's just like that. It's just unfortunate. But again, I do like the new eye stalks. Like they gave a lot of like new colors. Like they gave red. They gave like a dark blue and all that. Again, like they reflected the Metro eye stalks. They also gave like Mata heads. That was like the second last time we ever saw the Mata head in Bionicle, unfortunately. Because we did see them last in like the 2005 playable sets.
Yeah.
playset sets. But yeah, no, it was kind of too bad to see that go. But what's your opinion on the silver tops for the masks?
The silver tops, that's kind of an interesting thing. Something that I think, and like I guess this is related kind of to Mangai Project. A lot of people may notice that whenever we depict Matoran in the show in Metro Nui, they're not going to have silver tops on the top of their heads, or on the top of their masks. I kind of view it as a fad, almost, that like got introduced at some point. Where I'm just imagining like Kodan the Chronicler, some public Matoran or something starts like with, you know, he puts a silver top on his Kanoe, gets it commissioned. He tells everybody, "You don't have the silver yet. You don't have the top yet. What are you? What are you, lame? Go buy a new." And like the whole thing is it's this conspiracy because the mask makers, the Tomatoran, actually like paid him off to show off his cool new mask so that they could make more money making silver topped Kanoe. That's my theory.
Yeah, there is like a bit of a lore thing behind it. Like I don't know when it actually got introduced. Like when, I don't know if like Greg said it offhand or if they said it in like a book or something. I don't think they actually said this in the year 2004, but I think the reason why they had those was because of like a Civil War thing. It was basically like a political thing to be like putting silver on your mask to show that like it's depowered or something. Like I think it's kind of cool.
It's tied to the war. That's a cool idea. Yeah.
Yeah, like I think that's cool, but also I mean it's because you don't have it in your project. I don't think that's going to be a deal breaker for anyone. I mean, like they don't even have that in like the Miramax films, so like I think you're good. I wouldn't worry.
Yeah, it's, you know, it's one of those things to you know, you're working around a lot of different. I guess to me, it means more for the utilization of the story to have. It's one of those things where, you know, whenever you're writing a story like this and there are a lot of different components that are laid out, and a lot of them, you know, you're kind of piecing together different types of things. With some elements like that, it becomes more advantageous to the story to move something that maybe happened like right before the story's events to happening, you know, like during the story's events. It allows for just a little bit more complexity in the narrative than trying to explain silver topped masks and say, yeah, this happened before.
Yeah, no. And also I mean like it's also like it's not really a super important detail, and I'm sure it makes like the animation a little bit more difficult to do if you were to incorporate that, like to keep that kind of consistent. And yeah, I don't think it's a detail that you need to throw in there. I think you're okay on that. But yeah, speaking of the film, oh wait, no, we still haven't talked about like the Vaki or the Titans yet. But like, what do you think about the Vaki? A lot of people don't like them.
Vaki are overhated. My boys are overhated. They did nothing wrong. Those Matoran deserved it. Okay.
Damn.
The I actually, in my opinion, the Vaki sets. This is a hot one. The
Okay.
Vaki sets are superior to the Visorak, strictly because if I carry around a Vaki and play with it, his whole half of his body doesn't flip up just because I turned him upside down on accident.
I think that's a good reason. Yeah, like the Visorak are cool just because of the big new mold, and I mean like they're also spiders, so that's kind of cool. But you know who else can crawl? The Vaki. I don't see
Exactly.
Yeah, they got the Borak type function where.
And they can all fly.
And they can fly, yeah. They can canonically
Isn't it like
fly.
the Keelorak are the only ones who can fly out of the Visorak?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. It's one of them. I never remember like the specific names of like each like drone. Like I just say like the blue one or the green one. Like, you know, like I'm not.
I think it's the green ones, and they like spin like a top to fly, which is the weirdest thing.
Bro, it's kind of scary, bro.
I mean, yeah, it's an effective scare tactic, to be sure.
Yeah, like what if like you went to Australia and then you just saw like a horde of like spinning spiders, like just.
You're telling me
going
that
at you.
isn't what happens in Australia?
Oh yeah, I've never been to Australia to tell a tale, so there's that. Don't take what I say as fact or fiction. Yeah, like I definitely think they're way overhated. Someone I know who's notorious for hot takes thinks they're better than the Rakshi. Do you agree with that?
All right, that's gonna have to be a
So
no for
no.
me, Chief. Yeah.
Fair
The
enough.
Rakshi have wrists. That's gonna be my rebuttal for that.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I think that's completely valid. Yeah, I think the Valky are definitely overhated. I don't have too much to say on them. I think they maybe would have benefited from having like because they had like those Metro knee, the upper knee part. I think maybe like some armor would have been nice, but like they're also supposed to be like drones, so they're not supposed to like really have that, I guess.
They
But
couldn't afford it.
yeah, they
They
couldn't
spent
afford it
too
on
much.
mass producing. Yeah, there's that
Too
too.
much of the military budget. Nuparu was funneling it into his Boxor program on the side.
Oh yeah, definitely. No, Duma had the Palpatine Stormtrooper method. It's like, don't worry about the quality, just like mass produce them. We'll be good. We'll be good.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's all about numbers, baby. But of the three Titans, not including the combiner, well, I guess there's four technically because of the special set. What do you like the Kikanalo build? A lot of people also don't like Kikanaro for some reason.
I have, I think, 3 Kikanalo in my house right now, just because. Well, ironically enough, like after I started the project, it's one of those things where, like, in a weird turn of events, people start like offering me Lecon sets. They're like, "Hey, man, you're running this Lecon based project. Would you like? I have this set here. Do you want it?"
Yeah, you're not gonna
So,
say no to that. Like,
yeah, you can't say no to that. Um, the Kikanalo, it's good. It's solid. I would say it is a downgrade from the Rahi from uh especially the Rahi from 2003, because it doesn't have any functions. It doesn't have any. It's kind of just a static model.
mm-hmm. No, I agree with that. I definitely think the O1 Rahi had a lot more playability and things like that. And even like Puku, like from 2003, he had like the cool like travel function with like the knot wheels that he has to make the legs move. Like I think that's really cool. But yeah, I like Kikanarlo more than the Gecko Bird. I'll say that. Sorry, Gecko Bird. And also like yeah, like I definitely think that set complements it's complemented with a Toa next to it. Like it's just made to have like a Toa ride it. I think, or at least like the model that they went with.
It kind of makes me wonder if the because like obviously in the story, Lecon, or at least the 2004 story, the Lecon or the Kikanalo is never ridden by Lecon at any point. But it makes me wonder if the Lego designers or Greg at some level, whenever he was writing this, whoever, I guess Greg wasn't fully in charge, but whoever was writing it at the time, I wonder if it was kind of a hint where Lecon was located. It's like, hey, if you're up on the lore and you see the set coming out, maybe Lecon is hanging out where the Kikanalo are.
Yeah,
You know,
no,
it's-
maybe yeah. That's a cool little like yeah. I could see that. That's possible. Because I think after they scrapped the prototype model of the Kiknalo, I think they were like, okay, we gotta give this guy like a Toa or something. Kind of like they were using the Takanuva logic where it's like he had I forget the name of his bike thing, but like
the Usanui
the
or
Usanui,
whatever.
yeah, something like that. And so I think they were trying to do that again. It's like, okay, we'll give you a gray silver thing with a gold guy. We'll do that again, and it worked. And he has a cool board that he can hover and use his swords and a shield. So there you go.
If it broke, don't fix it. Do it again.
Oh yeah, exactly. No, and then they ended up not doing it again for whatever reason. So who knows what happened with that? But yeah, I mean, like obviously, like Lacan's, like I said earlier, I think he definitely is the best looking Toa of that year with like the dark red instead of the gray. I respect what they were trying to do with the gray because it was just like kind of like the theme of Metro Nui. Especially like implementing that with the Matoran and the Toa. Like I get that, but I also don't think the gray is also that great when
A question for you about the gray though. In just a thought. Perhaps the gray was utilized in the sets in the same way the silver-topped masks were, to show at some level that the Toa did not feel like they were up to the same level that Lee Khan was. Hear me out.
That's one of those things where it's like one of those happy coincidences where it's like, hey, that makes a lot of sense, but I know that's definitely not what the designers.
No, it wasn't.
Definitely
but listen,
not. But no,
listen,
stuff like
that's
that,
going to be my theory now.
No, I definitely like that, and that's probably what I would look at if I saw like a non-modified version of them, like I have on my shelves. I'm like, yeah, okay, it's just they have the Matoran thing because they were Matoran, and they don't feel comfortable being Toa yet. Makes sense. But yeah, no. So Kikanarlo and Lacan, pretty solid set. But yeah, who's your favorite out of like the Dark Hunters and Duma?
Ooh, so are we talking about? Okay, sorry, it threw me off.
No,
specifically the sets. Yeah. I heard who's your favorite Dark Hunter, and
I said Dark Hunters and Duma, because I forgot. Yeah. Like, oh yeah, Duma's not like a Dark Hunter.
So out of the three, definitely Nadiki, like by a mile, because Kreka he's a mess of just like technic parts thrown. Yeah, I mean it's fair. And Duma, Nivok is cool, but one of my complaints about Nivok is that he really just doesn't have that great of posability.
No.
Like he can open and close his wings. He's got his leg things going on, but there's just not that much variety in play.
Yeah. One of the key elements with Bionicle, especially like in its earlier years, was that it would have like the option between like posability and functionality, and sometimes they would prioritize one over the other. Like in later years, they were focusing a lot on posability and things like that. And I don't think focusing on functionality was necessarily the right move of Nivok. I think what they just should have done was just keep like Duma on his chest strap thing. I think that's kind of cool. But then they probably just should have given him like posable wings rather than like ones you can just spring out.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, like again, like I admire the idea, but like it's just like he's just kind of standing there awkwardly, like with no arms, basically, and he's like, my wings are in one position, or they're spread out, and he looks kind of incomplete. Like, especially when you look at the film design version, I don't know why, it kind of gives me that vibe. I'm just like, he doesn't feel like he's, like, full. But, yeah.
Ikanalo was wronged. Nivok took his other action feature.
Yeah, definitely. What's your opinion of Duma's build being honestly it's a superior Metrotorin design because they actually give him the Borak limbs.
Yeah.
But what's your opinion on like that being like the Chiraga build of 2004?
I don't necessarily mind that build per se. For the Mangai project, we are redesigning the torso to kind of be a blend of, we're not going the full Miramax look, but we're also not, I think last time I looked at it, because he's not in the first episode and I've been focusing mostly on that, so it's been a while since I've looked at him. I believe the current design is basically like we use the Metru torso, but we kind of stretch and squash certain parts of it in the animation to give him that hunch, and I think he has like a robe over him or something like that. But so basically, I like the look, or it's not the worst thing that I've ever seen, but it certainly does not compare at all to 2001.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I wish they gave him a staff as well. He's kind of like, he's just a guy, like with his bird, and like I get that, but yeah, I don't know. I think a staff would have been cool, like some type of recolor or something, or a brand new Chiraga staff piece that would have been cool. But yeah, no, that's kind of that. Like I think I definitely agree. Nadiki is the best out of like the three of them, and obviously we talked about the Duma Ultimate Duma combiner. Yeah, I don't know. Would you say that's good for the set, so we should move on to the film, or?
Yeah, I think that pretty well. One other thing that I think is important about with 2004 are the the great disc pack, or specifically the disc packs and the
Oh, yeah.
lore around them. I was lucky enough to pretty recently finish my great disc collection, because that's the weird thing. They released. It's not like they just released every single possible disc. They released it was like a combination, like there were like 20 possible discs or something like that, and there were like pre-set numbers for all of them, and then 6 of them had the number 9.
Mm.
Just kind of a weird thing to mention about that is I believe especially the discs that were included in the sets, because like all of the Matoran had a specific disc, and like Nadiki had a specific disc, and so did Kreka. At one point, it feels like I've read this somewhere or something, that all of those discs were supposed to be like actual discs that would appear in certain books and stuff, so that it's like, oh, this is the disc he uses in this scene, and you can see the number right here. But I think it kind of got. I don't know. Somebody should go back through the 2004 books and see how consistent that is. Like with looking at the power that it uses in the book and comparing it to the set.
Yeah, like I see what they were trying to do. They were trying to have like the whole like Kanohi thing from the Golden Years, but it's just, I don't know, like at least with like the masks, like they were obviously like different shaped and they had recolors and things like that. The only thing that was like different about like the discs themselves were like the numbers and like the little bars on the side. Like, I mean, it wasn't like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that. I mean, like I respect the collectible aspect. I'm just like, why even bother at that point? And then it sounded like
Can you imagine if they?
Anyway.
Yeah, can you imagine if they did every possible combination of disc out there? How many would I guess somebody out there knows how many discs? Commented in the video chat. Yeah,
chat,
I gotta know.
I have to know, is this real? No, but like, yeah, again, that's just kind of like one of those weird things I'm happy to fully go with, but like, I see what they were trying to do. I think like they probably should have done like the Kanohi recolors again. I don't know how it would have fit in the story, but I think that would have sold a lot better. Especially like the silver tops being a thing, and like you could have also had like the reverse where the great masks were so focused on in the original years, and you could have had it more focused on the Tragus ones, and then the great masks are like more exclusive, kind of like that. But yeah, they didn't decide to do that, unfortunately. But yeah, no, I think that kind of includes that. What's your opinion on Legends of Metro Nui?
Legends of Metro Nui, best Bionicle film, in my humble opinion.
I agree with that. I bounce between 2 and 3 just because like 2 has always been my favorite, but I always found that like 3 has like things that are more like interesting, like the stuff like Rudaka and Sidorak and all that. I think really carry that film. IDS kind of said like there's almost like some weird like mature storytelling like snuck in there, but obviously they ain't like, it wasn't like totally fleshed out or anything, but I found that it was interesting that they actually included that in like a kid's movie with like the queen using the king type of thing, like she wasn't like yet. Like that's kind of, again, like some Game of Thronesy kind of stuff. It's kind of cool. But yeah, no, like 2, like I always found was just, I don't know, like out of all of them, definitely the best one, 100% the best one. And it's funny because when I was a kid, 2 was the first Bionicle film I saw. So when I saw 2 and they were talking about Lacan, they had like his little thing with Nadiki calling him brother. It's like, oh, what, he fell, like, he's like, there's so much backstory. I can't wait to watch Bionicle 1 and see see Lacan's team and all. It's like, oh well, no, that was actually Mask of Flame. So that was my experience with it. But yeah, no, the film itself though is like, even though Lacan's not like a huge character in that film, like his presence, like again, IDS said this in the last one, he just has a lot of really good points and things like that stuck with me. Like, you feel his presence throughout the whole film. Like, his legacy is like obviously like being shown through like the city around him, like these sculptures, and even just the Toa trying to like live up to that legacy. Like, it's really cool.
It's almost claustrophobic, I think, is a little bit of the vibe, like just that legacy of Lacan. Like it's, in a way, like Duma slash Pterodax is obviously the antagonist of the film, but I certainly think that Lee Khan's legacy is, which, it's interesting. Lee Khan is a good character, right? Like, but it's his legacy that is almost an antagonist in the film, specifically to Vakama, of course, to like the wider team as a whole as well.
No, definitely. And it's just, you see, it's just really cool, like how you start out with this like veteran Toa who's highly skilled, and he's sure of himself. Like, Nadiki sneaks up, he's like, no, you don't call me brother, like, screw you. Like, like he has this like attitude and this drive, and it's like so cool. And obviously, like, the moment when he decides not to fight back but to save Vakama, because he knows, like, this isn't my battle anymore. It's just like, especially like when you go ahead and like you read the stuff that came later, it just makes those moments like so much more like rich, and you're just like, oh man. But yeah, no, it's definitely probably the highlight of the film for me, even though he's only in there for like 3 minutes or less, as a Toa. But no, like Vakama, it was almost like proto Matoro in a weird way, of like the self-esteem thing, being like, oh, I'm not gonna be a real Toa kind of thing. Like, everyone loves talking about Matoro's kind of arc. It's like, well, I mean, obviously Vakama's arc kind of got derailed a little bit in 3, even though I still think he was probably the better candidate to be like the one that betrays them, but then learn from it, and then he's like this guiding mentor figure in like the original years. I respect that, but like, yeah, I don't know. I feel like a lot of people just kind of ignore what Vakama kind of had to go through, and just to be like, oh, it's like, oh, well, Matoro died. It's like, okay, yeah, that's sad.
My boy Vakama did not get seduced to the dark side and freaking almost kill his team to be called, oh, the other Maytoro guy.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I'm saying. There. This Vakama slander. Like, I know Vakama's kind of a little bit of a, he's a little bit of a wuss sometimes. But hey, I mean, like, we all change. We grow. But yeah, no. I mean, yeah, I don't know. What's your like overall opinion on like the vibe of the film, and like definitely like what do you think, like what about it is your like makes it your favorite?
So a big thing that I like about the film is that it, with the other Bionicle films, it kind of feels like while I'm watching the movie, I want to like go out and read the comics or read the books or something, because like whenever I'm watching the movie, I can't help but feel like there are pieces missing, especially for Bionicle 3 is a really good example, because there are just so many moments in the movie that are taken from the books. I think the books took them from the movie, but either way, I'm just gonna it makes more sense like this. The books have just so many moments that are taken from the movie that do them better, right? And like they flesh them out, where I'm sitting here watching the movie and I'm thinking, I really wish that there was more dialogue around each of these scenes to flesh out these characters more, because I've already experienced it told in a better way. That's not the case with Bionicle 2. That like whenever I'm watching it, I feel like it's a complete narrative. I enjoy the character work that's being done. I mean the main section of story that they cut out for Legends of Metro Nui is the Morbizak arc, but ultimately at the end of the day, it doesn't add too much to the overreaching narrative of Legends of Metro Nui, so that is okay to be its separate thing that adds to the lore without necessarily it kind of it can be its own separate thing without me feeling like, oh, I'm watching an inferior version of this year's story.
That's fair. I feel like with Metro Nui specifically, like the movie, not like the setting or the place, but like I will say, like, there are parts of, like, the books I just wish were in the film. Like, if the film was, like, another half hour long, I wish it would have seen, like, more, like, the team being a team, rather than just teaming at the end when they were, like, kind of all just shitting on Vakama throughout the whole film. Like, when they were getting their... Obviously, the Morbizak story is cool. Like, getting their Kanoka discs, and... I might be misremembering this, but, like, they fought Rakshi too, like in one of those books as well.
Yeah, that was the one with the shapeshifter Kraka.
Yeah,
Whenever they went down into the archives, yeah, that is also a fantastic little side tangent or little side thing that they go on for that one book. It's like the episode of the show that doesn't. It's like right before you get into the season finale arc where they're like, okay, we have some space here, we need to fill it, and it's like the greatest episode of the whole season.
Yeah, no, definitely. Yeah, like I wish like maybe not like I get like if you were to put that in the film, like it would probably extend the film by like an hour or something. But like I do feel like some more team bonding between the Metru was kind of like required. Like because they literally get split in half like 20 minutes into the film, like But yeah, no, like it's definitely my favorite Bionicle film, and there's a lot of like memorable stuff about it. What's your opinion on Pterodax / Makuta being the bad guy of that film? Because obviously, like when you read other Bionicle stories and you read or you watch even some of the other films, like I feel like they tried to make Pterodax like a twist in Bionicle 2, but I feel like it's just very obvious from the beginning. The only twist to it was that he was impersonating Duma. What's your opinion on that?
I think that, like, I like the fact that it's Pterodax. I like the fact that it informs on his backstory. My only complaint with that twist is it ages the advertising material around the movie. For a specific example, the Toa Metru commercial that has like all of the Toa Metru doing their specific animations, and it talks about like they know their destiny. Do they know this. They mention, and there are a couple of mentions from 2004 about this, but this it's like they say a mysterious, like there's a mysterious villain or like an unknown threat that they're going to have to face. I think it ages that a little bit because whenever you see that in the advertisements, I kind of get excited post 2004, like, oh, like what mysterious character. Oh yeah, it's Makuta. Okay.
Yeah, there's that too. I do like that it played with this idea of like a Turaga being like a bad guy or like being like a villain, especially like the 1984 kind of themes they had going on with the Vaki animations, like the Matoran, like do work is good. Like I thought that was like really, again, like Bionicle was like, even though it was directed towards kids, they didn't like treat their audience totally like kids. Like obviously like they wouldn't go straight up like crazy insane like like passages about like war crimes and stuff, but like they had like mature kind of aspects, but obviously like there were like just undertones in there, and I think that kind of goes like there's a lot to say for it with that, like just with the range that Bionicle had as an IP.
Something that's interesting about Duma specifically, like how he's represented within the story, and I'm talking about the actual Duma, not the actual Makuta.
Duma.
Yeah. Something that I think has a lot of story potential behind it is the fact that the Metru Nui, it's this big capital city. There are a lot of eyes on Metru Nui. Let's be realistic, and I find it very fascinating, and just from a storytelling perspective, that Duma gets replaced by Pterodax and has all of these, like enforces all of these laws about, like working, like basically creates the state that we find Metru Nui in at the beginning of the film. And Lee Khan's the only one who really notices.
Yeah.
So I think that says something about Duma, and he's represented in the same way in 2006, as well as kind of somebody who really does not sympathize with the Matoran in much regard, or sees them more for their utility than their actual sentience, which is a weird thing too, because I think a lot of the community, or I guess this is just something that I've encountered while discussing this, with people is I've noticed that there is actually a lot of resistance to the idea that Duma is somewhat of a minor antagonist, even when he is a good guy.
Oh no,
You know,
I
so
definitely always perceived him as like, I don't know how familiar you are with like Star Wars lore, but kind of like how Mace
Yeah.
Windu was presented. Yeah, it's like that type of figure. Like, yeah, I know, I totally agree. Like, I don't really know why people are like resistant to that, just because that's just how he acts. It's just how he is. I definitely think there's a reason why he was like that. You know, maybe things he experienced as a Toa compared to others, but like, there was a Turaga of Metro Nui before him, you know, so you have to wonder like what happened to that person. So like there's could be so many different reasons for it. Like there's a lot of story potential there, but yeah, like I mean, like I don't really know. Again, like that's kind of an interesting thing. I never really heard that like people kind of perceive Duma. I never really heard people be defensive of Duma. If anything, I've heard a lot of people like kind of crapping on him just because he's like kind of the way he is. Stick up.
Listen, sometimes they're Vaki defenders, sometimes they're Duma defenders. You never know what you're gonna meet.
No, that's true. That's true. No, fair enough. But yeah, no, I mean like, and I think that kind of like just summarizes a lot about like Metro Nui is that there's, I think for like the main years that we had it for, like IDS kind of mentioned that like he thinks that it kind of got wasted a little bit in 2005 from like what the choices that they made. But like I find that they did a lot of setup and a lot of like, really great things with 2004, and then they kind of like left them alone for a little while, and then obviously Greg went back and fleshed things out with the serials like the 2 Yet serial and Birth of a Dark Hunter and things like that. But yeah, no, I definitely think it was a year for a lot of potential. I think it did a crazy amount of world building, like, but yeah, I didn't really go anywhere in terms of like the main kind of story. Like once Pterodax got sealed away and Vakama went on his little like, you know, edgy teenager kind of phase with Rudaka, then that era was kind of like done, you know, and then it got revisited later. I definitely think that's kind of like how I look at 2004, because the more I think about 2004, a lot of my favorite things about it are things that kind of like were established later or were mentioned like later in as things were coming out. But obviously I still love what they did with it, and I definitely think it's an underrated year now. Where would you rank it on your favorite years kind of a rank?
2004, number one, baby.
Number one, baby. Yeah, there you go. Interesting, funny. All right, now let's shift the gears a little bit. You know, we're an hour into this, which is crazy. I think that's good. Just goes to show like the dynamic that we're having right here, talking about 2004 and Lacan and you know all those guys. What is the Mangai project for those that aren't familiar with it?
Sure. Yeah. So the Mangai project is the name of. Functionally, it's the name of the studio. And it's a group of creatives. Some of us are, you know, script writers. Some of us are animators, musicians, you know, composers, etc. And we are working on a prequel series to Bionicle 2 that follows the story of the Toa Mangai and their, you know, leader Likan as he works with his team to defend the city of Metro Nui from various threats posed by the Dark Hunters and eventually Pterodax, which leads the intent is to have it lead directly into Bionicle 2.
Right. Would you say that like it's more so intended to be like a prequel to Bionicle 2, or like how connected to canon is your approach to this? Because it's a tricky thing, especially with Bionicle and how many like little details could easily just contradict something that you know you make. Like obviously, like I don't think those small details necessarily matter too much aside to the 1% of people that know them. But in terms of like the accuracy approach, like are you going to be adapting stories differently? Are you going to be focusing on adapting it into the movie versus adapting it into the overall story?
So basically how we're approaching this is we are approaching the story from a canon first perspective. And what that means is we begin with the assumption that we need to fit everything into canon, right? So let me think of a good example that I can bring up without. Oh, okay. Here is a very good example. For instance, in the canon depiction of the arrival of the Toa Mangai, Duma sends out the Vaki ahead of the Dark Hunters arriving at the Colosseum. It's in Legacy of Evil. If so, yeah, there's a lot. The Legacy of Evil is basically our Bible when it comes to this section. But he sends them out, and within like the hour has the Toa arrive, and it's implied that the Vaki basically, flew out to where the Toa were, mounted them, brought them in, and Duma was like, yeah, I sent out the summons, and blah, blah, blah. We are doing our best to fit into that idea while also leaving room for credibility and world building. For instance, we have the Toa being summoned much sooner, like in advance of that particular thing, and they are located offshore at a station or at a base or something, and the Vaki are sent out there to pick them up from that base. So it's as canon compliant as we can make it, while also maintaining. There are a couple of quirks like that in Legacy of Evil, and this is not a bash against Greg at all. He's one of my favorite authors, but there are just a couple of different quirks, especially in these unfleshed out sections of the story, like Legacy of Evil, where things will be mentioned and it works for the story that's being presented, but not necessarily for logic around, like facilitating logical character interactions and motivations. So there are little things like that that to serve the logic of the story that we've made changes to. But overall, where we can, our intent is to make it as canon accurate as possible while still writing a story that makes sense with character motivations that work together. If that makes sense. Sorry, that was a big mouthful.
No, I mean it's a complicated question, and like again, like to make something fit into Bionicle's overall story, like not just like making sure certain things line up to the film or making sure things line up with like the main stuff. Like so many things about like so many different characters are just spread out like crazy. Like you can look at Biosector, for instance, and they have everything lined up in like a timeline thing, but there's still like details that like it's simplified, but like there's still like important details that like aren't even on there that you would have to look at like the direct character pages just to double check something. Like I've been noticing that when writing my thing, but like so I definitely think that's I think that's a good method, just to do the canon first thing and then obviously write something and then you notice later like, oh, it kind of contradicts something else and maybe adjust it or whatever. But like I mean, even like shows like the Clone Wars kind of tackled, not like tackled, but like they had to like face issues kind of like that, like where they would have to like check things to make things were good. And back when George Lucas was at Lucasfilm, like during that era, like because they would kind of like, with their approach to that show, like they would kind of like take some things from the EU or from Legends, which is now what it's like referred to, and they would either change them a little bit or they would like just straight up like ignore certain details, but they would make sure everything's consistent with the real story. So that was kind of like where my question sort of like sparked from. What made you guys go with the 2D animation medium? It's quite a unique medium. We haven't really seen that a lot, especially with the Bionicle space.
Mm-hmm. So choosing a medium whenever, and this is, I guess, kind of just advice for fan projects in general. This is advice that was given to me whenever I started out on my journey. Basically, whenever you're choosing a medium for any type of project, it doesn't have to be a fan project, but any type of project that you're doing, this can be, you're going to have to choose a medium. Sometimes it can just be written, sometimes it's an audio podcast, sometimes it's stop motion, whatever, 3D animation. You kind of are faced with you're I guess one of the biggest challenges that you have to overcome is suspension of disbelief. And just to clarify what that is, it's basically just, your audience has to believe what they're seeing. And whenever, depending on the medium, that can either be very easy or very, very difficult, depending, like on the medium and the budget and everything else. Like, if I write a story and I say Vakama uses a burst of flame to melt his iced tea or something, right? If I write that, nobody's going to bat an eye. They're like, well, yeah, Toa Vakama can shoot fire. But what if I do stop motion with that? Now all of a sudden, you're getting into the effects of it. You're getting into, making that look realistic, but also not too realistic to break immersion, but all these, and not so realistic that it makes the stop motion look bad, or it's so you run into a lot of challenges. 2D animation is very, very good at presenting unbelievable things and making them feel believable, especially cell shaded simple animation in the style of Tartakovsky was a huge influence for us. He's Samurai Jack, 2003 Clone Wars, those types of projects. So it's like that was the decision behind the medium, is just to allow for the fantastical powers, like mask powers, elemental powers, all of those things, to not break the suspension of disbelief whenever they were presented. So.
Yeah, and with that being said, I do think consistency is also another thing too, right? Like, like when you say like those effects, like sometimes you can have like a really, really good effect that like you had someone work months and months and months on, and then the next shot just looks nothing like it. Like that for me, like I can kind of like get behind something not looking like super like production heavy as long as everything's like consistent. But yeah, no, I mean, like it sounds like you definitely have the right idea of going with the 2D medium, and like I said, like I think it's long overdue. In the Bionicle
something else with 2D animation too is that I grew up immersed in it, and as I'm sure most of us have, and just recently, over the past couple of years, the 2D animator, that career path, a lot of the people who are in the trenches working on building a career where they can get paid for or have their work commissioned and everything. It's a pretty difficult time for them right now, and so in some ways I feel like our ability to we're not the highest profile studio out there. We're not working on some big project or something, but if I can if I can help them to work on their talents, work on stuff, and like help them out in between jobs or in between all of those things, that's one of the goals of mine as well with this project.
No, that's fair enough. That's fair enough. What software is being used with the series?
We use lots of different animation software. It kind of just depends on what the individual artist is bringing to the table. What they're familiar with, because whenever they to clarify on the process a little bit, basically every single frame of the show is hand drawn. I don't think if we've used rigs, it's very minimal whenever it comes to most of our stuff is just frame by frame, hand drawn digitally. But how they export these is they export them as PNGs with a transparent layer so that we can layer it on top of whatever background and stuff. Very similar to, like traditional cell animation. They'd have like the, flimsy plastic cell that they would place over the background and then, take a picture and remove it. But yeah, so that's kind of how we do it. So as long as they're exporting in the format that we need, which most I would think if you were an animation program and couldn't export a PNG, I feel like you'd need to go back to the programming drawing board.
Yeah.
But
exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it allows us to be very flexible with the artists that we have, which is a very fortunate thing.
Nice. You kind of mentioned like some influences with like Samurai Jack and the 2003 Clone Wars. What other animated series or shows have kind of had some type of influence on this project?
I mean, Tartakovsky does define a lot of Cartoon Network, but there are lots of other Cartoon Network shows, it's basically, just that whole 2000s to 2010s era, and some 90s as well. Another influence that's outside of standard cartoon stuff is we actually drew a lot of influence from the 2015 Bionicle animations, just because those, whenever people think 2D animation and Bionicle, I feel like that's the first thing that comes to mind for people who have seen it.
Yeah.
So
but that one's made
we
very
based a lot of
differently.
our stuff on. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Monog.
Oh yeah,
that's
Mangai,
another
of
one.
course. Yeah, I would say your project, just from what you've described it as, like has a lot more relations to Monog rather than the 2015 ones, because those 2015 ones, like, it's pretty obvious for most of the scenes. Like, there's that one random scene where Tahu becomes like an anime character and starts like slicing up all those skull spiders and things like that. But like, it's mostly like rigged animation. But yeah, you guys are going like the traditional route with the modern technology, which I think is really cool.
Yeah, I feel like it's a lot more expressive, and it gives the animators more stuff to do. More ways to express themselves. Smear frames. If you don't know what those are, it's basically like the frame. Whenever you're doing a quick movement or something, sometimes you have to stretch and smear the character. Our animators have a lot of fun doing cursed smear frames and stuff. I know it used to be a trend, and this is something that like I learned from my parents. Like, I'm not this old, no offense, but The Simpsons, I guess it was like a whole thing where a lot of people would go frame by frame through that show because the animators would do interesting smear frames just as an expression of their own, artistic talents, and like just to mess around with stuff. So I feel like you lose that element as well with rigged animation.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. Do you have any history working with the animation medium outside of the Mangai project?
My background, whenever it comes to film type stuff like this, I mostly come from a writing background and performance background. I went to college with a minor in theater. I was in theater a lot. Nice. So that hopefully that doesn't come off too strong.
No, it doesn't. No. I wouldn't never guess that, actually. But yeah, no, it's cool.
And so like I come from that perspective, so writing, and eventually I'd like to voice work one of the characters. But I come from that background, but I did some very rudimentary stop motion back in the day. Like whenever I was pretty small, I would dread to see what that looks like with my modern eye, now. But I guess I'd like to think that my film experience is more of like a Tarantino type of experience, where he's like, yeah, I watched a lot of films, and so that's basically what I've done. I've just absorbed a lot of 2D animated content, and that's kind of my background with it.
Yeah, no, that's cool. So I'm gonna shift gears from the animation side to kind of like the more like the story and like the narrative kind of side here. Like, so how was it like creating new characters, or like fleshing out characters that like we've only heard of really by name, such as like characters like Codan? And specifically a lot of the other Mangai characters, because there's 11 of them, I believe, 4 of them being Toa
Yes, there
Bias.
are.
Yeah, I know, there's quite a bit of them. So what was it like creating characters like that and like deciding on the designs and just it's kind of things like that general kind of process? Because obviously each character requires like a different kind of approach, but just your general process for making a new character for this world and for this series, like what was your process with that?
Yeah, so it's kind of a double-edged sword, with having not that much detail fleshed out for these characters. On one hand, it's nice because you have more room to introduce new ideas, but on the other hand, it's one of those things where you have to be you kind of have to skirt around, people's at some point, you're going to hurt somebody's headcanon, you're going to hurt somebody's, just because it doesn't. So the intent that kind of how we approach character design is in 2 separate directions. So on one hand, we approach it. Well, I'll approach it from the conservative side first. So we approach it kind of conservatively in so much as we do our best to look at basically like fandom theories on, like who these characters are. Not necessarily looking to steal stuff, but more looking to kind of just see, are there consistent things that people believe these characters are across different stories, across the fandom. Like, I'm trying to think of a good example of that. Specifically for the Toa of Stone, a lot of fan stories like to have him as he was involved at some level with the Matoran Civil War. And so like he's coming from that background, he's familiar with Metro Nui, he has, like that type of stuff. So that's an example of something that we really leaned into with our story. So we allow that conservative side to inform the more, experimental stuff that we're doing with the story, to fill in the gaps, basically, like to explain, okay, well, he was involved in the Civil War. What has he been doing since then? How does that affect where he is now? All of that stuff. And then you can get a little bit more free flow and out there. I know you mentioned Kodan specifically, like some of the characters. There are established aspects about some of these characters, like, we know Kodan's name, we know his occupation, we know that he, shared the same fate as the Toa. Like we do know certain aspects of these characters, and that can help inform some of their arcs. Something that's interesting, and not a lot of people know this, but the Mangai, specifically their masks, like I want to say if you really use deductive reasoning and try and like fit all of the pieces together, especially like for example, for a good example of fitting all the pieces together, the Shadowed One, there's an example of him picking up a mask at one point, and it's implied it's one of the Toa Mangais.
Yeah, he picked up a Kakama. Really? That was one of them, I think.
Yeah, so like it's important to look at all of these different areas to like it. Yes, that mask isn't necessarily named to a specific Toa. But if you start using deductive, reasoning and start canceling out all of the other masks that have been canonized, at the end of the day, the only Toa that mask could belong to is the Toa of Earth. Mm-hmm. So now, like he does have a canon mask. It's not explicitly stated, but he does have one if you use the process of elimination. So you really have to you really got to have your fingers sunk into all of these little corners of the story in order to piece together this narrative. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's kind of a combination of both. Writing new things and just trying your best to fit all of the old stuff in.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting about the Toe of Stone that you mentioned. I haven't really heard people really mention that one before. Maybe that's just because of the spaces that I hang out in. People don't really talk about this era too much, but like, Yeah, like where did that kind of originate from that he was part of the Civil War?
I think it's just because of the proximity to like the Civil War is an event that precludes the story of the Toa Mangai. So I think it's just something that resonates with a lot of because it was very it was started by Ta Metru and Po Metru.
Mm-hmm.
So Lee Khan, I'm trying to remember if it's actual canon or if it's just head canon that Lee Khan hadn't been to Metru Nui, or at least he wasn't stationed there.
He wasn't.
I'm not sure about. Yeah, that's sometimes like I can never remember. It's like, is that something that we came up with or is that actual canon?
Yeah,
but
no, I got that for sure. Yeah, I do.
So since he wasn't there before, he can't have been involved in the war, but there is a Toa of Stone that could very well have been involved, so it's just kind of easier to have him involved and allow the narrative complexities to come from there.
Yeah, no, that's interesting because for one of my Mangai Mocs, I have a Toa of Ice, the one with the road, that was actually present during that era, like just from the Mocs backstory type of thing. So it's kind of funny how certain ideas like line up, like there's certain thought process patterns. So like maybe one of these Toa were a part there. I had the Toa of Ice there based on the experience that he had with with like the fanon thing, and yeah, no, that's cool. That's cool. I didn't know that.
Really quick, one other thing that I wanted to mention, just with this whole vibe, is the Toa names that we've chosen. Like I'll like Motara, Nihu, basically all of the Toa characters' names that we've had, we've tried to associate them with sections of Mata Nui, which is kind of a thing that most Bionicle fandom people are kind of aware of. Like Naho is a bay in there's the Mangai volcano, like all of that stuff. I do know that Greg mentioned at one point where he was like, it doesn't make sense for all of the locations in Mata Nui to be named after the Toa Mangai, but that's one of the decisions that we made pretty early on. Like, hey, we're trying to blend this in as much as we can with fandom, and it just makes a lot more sense for us to use locations on the island of Mata Nui, because I know that there are multiple Toa Motara, Toa of Stone Mocs out there, so it kind of helps to blend things together.
Yeah, no, that's cool. And there was also like where Lacan kind of came from, with like Lee the Surfer and things like that.
Yeah.
So there's the urban myth. I like that. That's cool. And obviously there's implications of like what the Toa Metru Turaga, like their thought process was when they were naming things like that. That's cool. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I'm just checking out the question list again. I got really into that combo. How much of the show will be like adaptation versus like original stories? So obviously you will have the main serials to adapt at some point. But there's also the Kanohi Dragon story. How, like, for like a ratio of like adaptation versus original stories, like what would you kind of say that percentage kind of is?
I would say that the show it would probably be 70-ish% original content and 30% drawn directly from they would. Well, let me clarify on that. So what I mean by that is on our YouTube channel, we have basically it's like an after credits scene for the episode, but we have a semi-finished version of it's scene 6, but it's the Paraka scene where the 3 Paraka basically go to wake up the Kanohi Dragon. The dialogue that's in that scene that's direct Greg dialogue from Legacy of Evil.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So whenever I hear adaptation, right, like in my head, whenever I hear that, I hear, okay, so how much of this is like Greg dialogue? And so like at this point, like Greg does have some good solid dialogue from Legacy of Evil that we're able to pull from, but obviously, there it's like those are almost like the highlight scenes of each of these episodes. It's like, oh hey, we're building up to this big crescendo moment, and in that moment, like Greg does take over with his writing, but you have to get the characters from point A to point B. You have to get them from, and that is a huge chunk of the show as well. Like what happens in between these scenes, that's very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I definitely agree with that. What's your approach with balancing so many members of a Toa team? Just because the Mangai, like they're anything but like a stereotypical Toa team, like quite the opposite. Especially with there being 11 members. How do you kind of plan on like balancing out those characters, and like are you gonna have designated episodes for each one, or are you gonna try to like balance out the screen time?
So basically, how we've approached it so far is, a huge part of it is the visual, aspect of it. Making sure that these characters, if you line up a whole group of Mangai Mocs next to each other, like the Toa Mangai,
Mm-hmm.
As much as you try and vary it, you're going to relatively see about the same height. They're probably going to have very similar shoulders with the Metru build, so on and so forth. You don't have that restriction in animation, so we have like one or two characters who are like really tall and lanky, and we have one or two who are like really short, like, so like visually, you have to differentiate them like that. And characterization is a huge aspect of it too, making sure that these characters have distinct, memorable traits of them that, maybe if we can't give them a solo episode yet, they're at least, intriguing enough from even just a glance that you can connect with them, or even if they just have one line of dialogue. Eventually, I would like to see some arcs, like at least have some of them involved in more focused arcs, like give everybody a chance at the spotlight, but in these early episodes where we're still establishing world building and making sure that we're building up Lee Khan and Nadiki and those relationships, becomes important to have characters who are interesting at a glance.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to like the teams, this isn't on the document. I just kind of thought of it partway through. A lot of people have different approaches to making like their own like fan-in, headcanon, like Mangai teams, and some people, there's like it's not necessarily a debate or anything, but I see like it brought up sometimes. Like, what made you go with the idea that they were all like Metru builds? Because I'm also in that camp as well, that they should be probably all Metru builds, but what was your thought process behind that?
So internally, we have a design language around the eras of Toa builds, basically, and this is I think you can read into the canon and see this generativity whenever it comes to the Toa build, but how we kind of explain it internally, and I'll try my best to not like try the best and summarize it, but kind of how we see it is you have your original Toa build as built by the great beings, that was Helrix.
Mm-hmm.
And she's very technic style build, very bare bones, whatever, and we're looking at the canonized Helrix build, just because that's and going from there, you can almost see that Artaka takes the design cues from Helrix to build the Toamata. Like, they have similar traits, and the Toamata go and do their thing, and then they disappear.
Mm-hmm.
But the legends of the Toamata and what they did, you can see those legends carried all the way through to the island of Matanui. Like, Taragavakama knew their names, knew who they were, knew like what their destiny was at some level, that they would come to help in light our darkest hour, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
So in our opinion, Matoran designs are like, there's that whole lore about Matoran basing their look of, like whenever they get a Toa stone and they become a Toa, there's some lore around that their appearance as a Toa is based on their perception of what a Toa is.
Yeah.
So, at least in our opinion, the next, because like these Toa Mata have become so legendary and then they disappeared, whenever new Toa are created, like the next era of Toa build is the Anika build. So you see Toa like Toa Jovan and Lesovic and other Toa like that. That would be like, in our opinion, the second age of Toa builds, because like these are wide chested, just like these strong behemoth, like they almost look like demigods or something to at some level the Anika build does. But as like more and more Toa are created and the Matoran's perception of them becomes more realistic and defined, then you begin to see like Metru builds. That feels like something that it's similar to the Anika build, but it's more refined, it's more realistic, it's more utilitarian focused, all of that stuff. And so we see it less as like, oh, they're different builds for different regions and different, whatever. We see it more as like eras. And this is, it being close to the end of Metru Nui, and the Great Cataclysm. We see it more as like, this is the era of the Metru build.
Yeah, I definitely agree that it's like a generational / like era kind of thing. I might actually have to make a video on it or talk about like my kind of theory on it as well. But yeah, no, my thought process is very, very similar to that. No, I just thought I'd ask this because some people have some pretty crazy builds, and then they're like, yeah, this guy's on Lacan's team. It's like, he doesn't look like Lacan, but yeah, that's cool. But yeah, no, that's awesome. How many seasons do you think you guys are going to have? Obviously, like, there's nothing that's ever going to be locked in with like a fan series, but the rough idea right now, how many seasons do you think you're going to have with like episode counts?
Yeah, so, barring, like, just based on the assumption, like, let's say, hypothetically tomorrow, everything's completely funded, everything's, like infinite money glitch happens. Like, the dream would be to have 4 seasons, 6 episodes each.
Nice.
And all of those episodes are already, plotted out. Everything's kind of, and that's, yeah, so like that's the vision, but at the end of the day, how we kind of approach the episode, at least this first one, is if all that ever gets sent out is the first episode and it is an absolute banger and we call it a day, then it's still a victory. The 4 seasons, that's just icing on the cake.
Yeah. Oh, that's cool. What made you want to like start a project with this scale, especially with it being like in the animation medium and like the overall like story, like 4 seasons of story written out, what was kind of like the urge to get into it and to start laying out the groundwork for the project?
Well, I started working on the Mangai project 3 years before I actually made it public, and I made it public in 2020. So we're running on 7 years at this point. But
Nice.
I got basically, I just, like I originally envisioned this as maybe just something that I would write as a fun, little side project or something. And I guess I reached a certain point and I looked at the work that I had done, and I just kind of sat down and I was like, well, I'm artificially limiting myself by, I was sitting here saying, hey, I feel like this needs to be something that's a written story because I feel like I don't have the talent or the resources or whatever to make it anything more than that. But I guess I sat down one day and I was like, well, if I'm not going to do this, nobody else will, for this specific story that I'm writing. And I guess it just kind of came from there, like I feel like this story is worth telling, and I want to tell it the way that, give it justice. So, yeah, I felt like I was artificially limiting myself by trying to impose restrictions on something that maybe, didn't need them. And I think that whenever, basically, I made an Instagram live video in 2020 and said, like, hey, if anybody's interested in helping me tell this story, you're welcome to join the project. I'm going to start a Discord server and this. And the support that poured out from that, and the people who are just as passionate about this as I am, I think, got really reaffirmed that initial feeling of like, hey, this is something that should be given justice at some level. But I guess it's just if I can have anybody take something from that, it's just that, like, if you have a story to tell and you shoot for what you think your story's worth, shoot for the best medium that you think it fits the story, and worst case scenario, you can just pick it back up and go with the original plan. But you might be surprised how many people believe in you and believe in your story. So
Yeah. What advice would you give to others that want to make a fan project like that? I mean, you kind of like talked about that a little bit. Like, what else would you kind of say if someone like has like an idea similar to this, and they're just like, they don't know if they want to make it, they don't know if, like, what's gonna happen with it? Like, what would you say to them?
Something that I actually, this is a fine line to balance, and I haven't always balanced it perfectly. But surprisingly, I think I would give advice on learn how to get along with people who you who you would normally dismiss very quickly. And I guess what I mean by that is, most of the people who are starting fan projects or looking to start fan projects are part of the fandom already.
Mm-hmm.
And if you are a member of a fandom, it's very easy to communicate with people. It's very easy to have relationships with people. And if you're not if the person just doesn't really quite vibe with you, or you have a bad impression of them or something like that, it's very easy to just kind of dismiss it and be like, whatever. Some of the best resources on my team are people who I initially did not like and dismissed. But, whenever, and that's not that's not a knock against it. Like, I've communicated with those people and kind of like told them that story. But it's one of those things where, whenever you're working on a project with somebody, and whenever you're a lot of the people who you might be easy to dismiss, they may have better ideas than you do, and better things to add to the project, and better, so I guess just be open to that. Obviously, that can bite you in the butt at times if you trust somebody and it doesn't work out, or that. But I think that in life, it's a lot easier to, or it's better to work with somebody and get burnt a little bit and try again than it is to dismiss somebody and never, notice that they could have been a good friend or an asset.
Yeah.
Whatever.
Yeah.
No. Oh, and one other piece of advice too, kind of a separate thing, is and this is stuff that I learned from college and got bitten by, whatever. But make sure, if you have some kind of a project like this and you are running it, and like you're building it up and whatever, make sure that you maintain your vision, because that's something that you can lose sight of very easily, especially as a lot of voices come in, and that's not necessarily something that, it's not a reflection of them having like not as good of ideas, or not some, like, I know most of the people on the team probably have much better ideas than I have, let's be honest. But the initial vision of something and the intent of a work is something that you can lose very easily the more voices that you have in and the more involved people become. So, make sure that you're maintaining that while also it's a tricky thing to do, but I guess those are the two pieces of advice that I've learned mostly through I would say trial and error, mostly through error, and
enough, man.
getting bitten. But and that's not even with this project. I've done previous projects, even like in the past, and yeah,
Yeah. No, I think that's really good advice to, it all starts with unity, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, that's it's one of the three virtues. You can't get the other ones done without unity. So I think that's a good way to. I think that's yeah. There's a lot of people I find like I work in film outside of doing the channel. Like I work in the industry a little bit. Like not trying to make it sound like anything fancy or anything, but I definitely do agree with the teamwork aspect and being like having that willingness to hear people out, having that willingness to collab with people you wouldn't normally collaborate with, because you can really get some magic from that. And that's really what a lot of these projects kind of come down to is working together, and really it's just having fun at the end of the day. Because if you're not having fun doing projects like this or even just anything like that's like kind of film or like animated related, like then we shouldn't be doing that. We're in the wrong industry, right? So I definitely hard agree with all that. And that's all my questions. Are there any closing thoughts you want to add in?
Um, I will say that like if I hate to be the guy who shills the Patreon or whatever, but I have to because
Yeah.
that's
Well, that's how you're
that's how
funding it.
yeah, that's how, so we are one of the Bionicle projects who is fortunate enough to have that financial support, mostly because animation animation is and like you can censor my language or whatever, but
No, you
animation is
say
a
it.
bitch.
Yeah.
But and the people who do it, they're great people. There's no way that we can get the level of quality that we have without having paid commissions for them, and they deserve it. They're awesome. Every artist that we've worked with has been fantastic. So, but that is the reality. So do make sure if you guys like the project and want to see it become a reality, I like feeding my animators. I keep them in cages in my basement, and if you guys don't pay me, I can't feed them. That's how it works. Also, we just upped the Patreon benefits that we have, like in terms of the content and stuff. We've actually been releasing every animated model that we have in the show has a corresponding real life set that goes
Nice.
with it, and all of the sets are buildable. And we have instructions for them. So that's one of the big things that we've been working on recently is updating those instructions and re-releasing them, because we released them like 3 years ago. And anyway, that's but there are a lot of benefits on there too. So if you guys are interested in that, I would certainly appreciate it. We are right at the tail end of finishing this first episode. Like I was mentioning to Ben before we got started, I've been doing some final editing on a number of the scenes. I think we're animation complete right now, and it's just mostly polish. So, or mostly polishing. I don't really give out release dates anymore because
Yeah.
I gave out release dates in the past, and like I think my first release date was like, oh, it'll be out in 2020.
Mhm.
Insane. So but I will say it's we're on the tail end of it. It'll be out very soon.
Yeah.
So
No, well, we're all looking forward to it, and I hope that your full vision is realized in some capacity or another, like no matter what happens. And thank you so much for coming on here. No, it was nice talking to you. And you and I have never talked before. It's another cold turkey guest, so no, it's always fun. It's a fun dynamic. But yeah, no, I think I'll stop recording here, and thank you all so much for watching. and we'll see you in the next one.